What excites you about it?
It's just so transformational. Kansas has never experienced anything to this magnitude, where we have a global company bringing to our state the largest capital investment project in our state's history, with the most jobs. I mean, there are 4,000 jobs right at the EV battery plant. That doesn't count the additional 4,000 that we expect as suppliers set up camp around Panasonic. And we've just seen already, when it's not even open yet, the difference that it's making in just our school districts over there, our retailers, our roads, connections. It's simply amazing. And I think the sense of pride that Kansans have, that a company like Panasonic would choose us, that we had what it took to be that attractive to them when they had 70 other offers, and they chose Kansas.
Kansas is that one, and that's what matters. But so much taxpayer money is invested into this project, and you just mentioned yourself the difference that you've already seen Panasonic making in the community. To you, what does success look like for Panasonic in Kansas?
Well, I do know that we have invested a lot, but in economic development, that's what it takes. It takes money to make money. But I drive a very hard bargain, so I made sure that we would get a really good return on our investment. And we are already seeing that, and that will just continue to grow as Panasonic builds out and all of these supply companies come in around it. So we're just going to see skyrocketing property tax values, revenues from income taxes that will be generated by all these new jobs that will be in the area. It really truly will transform that entire corridor, really Lawrence to Kansas City, but then spreading into Topeka.
For any viewers that are just curious about accountability, what does that look like for Panasonic to make sure that they are fulfilling their obligations to receive those incentives?
Well, we very carefully crafted, our contract and negotiations with Panasonic, so that unlike some other very large projects where the money was, sort of upfronted, we don't do that. Panasonic has got to produce before any of that money goes out. So there's money for instance, tax abatement or exemption on equipment and construction kinds of things. They've constructed, so that money has gone. They've produced that, but you haven't seen any money going out yet on some of the things around employment, until those jobs are actually up and running.
So does that look like quarterly or annual check-ins that they have to do with you all?
They have at least monthly, I think, actually, where they're reporting. I mean, obviously they want to get their money as fast as they can too. So I think they're pretty good about keeping us posted on where they are with the project and what boxes they've checked off the list.
I'm sure they would be eager to make sure.
Very eager to do that. But we have a lot of safeguards. I really do feel like I am the steward of taxpayers' money, and I want to be a good steward. And so we make sure we put in a lot of guardrails to protect Kansas and the taxpayers.
Speaking of, I know you already mentioned that the expectation is 4,000 planned jobs and then even more jobs to come from that. And you kind of made a comment that my colleague caught at the tour, anybody need a job or something along those lines. So with them having about 400 right now, right, out of that expectation, are you worried at all?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, they haven't even opened their doors yet. So, what they had to do is bring in the folks who, get the systems all set up, and then they'll come in, they'll follow with, the actual engineers here, programmers here, and whatever other kinds of high-tech over my head kinds of positions that they need. But no, I fully expect they can't operate. I went to the EV battery plant that they have in Reno, Nevada, long before we signed the deal with Panasonic to come here. They've got to have these employees. I mean, they're a business. They want to make money. They can't make money if they're not producing the batteries. They need the employees to produce the batteries. So I have no doubt that they will. It'll phase in. It's not going to be 4,000 next week, but by the time there's a schedule, and I fully expect that they will have that. And it's built into the contract that if they don't, they don't get the money. So it's in their best interest also. Same thing with the other suppliers. Now, the other suppliers that are coming in, some of them were, I think we had 5 of them can be included in the Apex legislation that we passed. But they'll be in the same position that they have to produce in order to get.
That's the motto, huh? Have to show the results. One thing that I want to ask you about, as recent as President Trump starting his presidency, one of his executive orders mentioned eliminating the electric vehicle mandate. And that means that some of those federal subsidies could be off the table. What is your reaction to that? Have you already heard some rumblings about it and how it could
Well, I've heard
impact?
rumblings, like everybody else has heard, that not only the EV cars, but the charging stations, and both of those are included in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And I do believe there's been discussion about holding that portion of that grant back. But I think it's been just discussion now. I don't think that it has actually happened. And there are going to be some competing forces in Washington, D.C. who are going to object to that. So while it said, I'll wait to see if it comes to fruition, and then we'll see how that really impacts what we're trying to do here in Kansas. We have been growing our EV stations, our charging stations all across the state, and we need to continue to do that because I think in some ways, no matter what happens, EV cars are the future. And so whether there's a pause, that pause will end and it'll begin again. So we have to prepare for that future because we know that's what it's going to be.
You agree that a lot of that federal funding is important to projects like this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, federal funding is
package?
Incredibly important. It's just like our local communities can't deal without a partnership with the state. They can't build their roads and do all the things that they need to do. They can't deal with natural disasters, larger ones, without the help of the state. Well, the state's in the same position, that there are just some things we can't do if we don't have the support of the federal government. So whether it is in economic development or it is in emergency management, public health, all sorts of ways that states are dependent upon the federal government. And that's how it's supposed to be. We pay a lot of taxes to the Kansans pay a lot of taxes to the federal government. So, it's not like we're just on the dole. We're just getting back some of what we paid in.
I know. I know it. Some mega deals like Foxconn in Wisconsin are an example of kind of commitments that aren't producing what was expected. Have you learned anything from maybe some of the deals that you've researched in your approach with Panasonic?
Well, you brought up Foxconn. I wasn't going to mention it, but we did learn a lot from that. Because that's one of those deals where the money was put up front, and then they didn't produce. And I can't say Kansas has never had that happen. We have. There were times in the past when money was put out and they didn't produce. But the one thing that Kansas, I think, has always had, at least in the history that I know, about 20 years of being in the state senate and then here, is that we have clawbacks. So if a company doesn't produce, we will claw the money back if it had been given out. I think we got even smarter, and particularly with something as big as the Apex bill, we decided that we didn't want to even put that much money at risk, that we would instead hold it until they produced and then release it.
Since we're talking about the process a bit, and you mentioned that Apex was carefully crafted, can you talk a little bit about what that negotiation process and approach was when it came to Panasonic?
Well, the bill itself was not designed with Panasonic at the table. The bill was designed to allow Kansas to bid on projects that guaranteed $1 billion or more in capital investment. And it only allowed for two projects. So Panasonic was one, and we don't have another one. And now Apex is actually sunsetted. So we've got just the one with Panasonic, but it was not developed totally around Panasonic. That we wouldn't do business that way, but it was crafted in a way that something like Panasonic would be eligible.
I've talked to a research group who examines a lot of these deals that state governments do, and one thing that they've said is that the secrecy sometimes behind closed doors of getting something like this together usually benefits the company more and not as much the taxpayers. What is your thoughts?
I know there was a lot of discussion about the secrecy, but that's just the way that it works. You have to sign these non-disclosure agreements in order to be able to have open and honest conversations and to be able to wheel and deal and negotiate. And that's why I'm particularly appreciative of the legislature that year that had to go on faith. There were some legislative leaders who had signed the NDA. They knew what was going on. Obviously I knew, and some of my staff knew. But it didn't go much farther than that. And so the fact that the legislature trusted their leadership in me and went ahead and passed it was quite significant. I don't try to do things in secrecy. We try to be as open as we possibly can, try to tell you the truth all the time. But there are just, in the business world, it doesn't work like that. And so I don't think that the secrecy ends up benefiting the company specifically. What it does is protects that company, though, from competitors, who might get details that would help them come in and undermine or undercut the company. So I think that's more what the NDA is about than the company getting a better deal.
No, let me just check our time real quick. Okay, we're doing good. I am curious, with Panasonic being such a huge deal, where does this project rank in some of what you're most proud of as governor?
Well, it's certainly way up there. There were a whole lot of things I wanted to accomplish as governor. Early childhood education, fully funding our schools, cutting taxes for Kansans, all sorts of things I wanted to do. But one of the, more nebulous things I wanted to do is I wanted to change the image of Kansas. I wanted Kansas to be seen as a very cool place, a place that young people would want to stay or come. And so landing something like Panasonic, landing something like Urban Outfitters, these readily recognizable companies with terrific reputations, for them to say yes to Kansas, I think gives license to a lot of people to say yes to Kansas. And so I think that's why it is one of my proudest moments, is because it fits right in with my desire to make Kansas cool.
I figured it was way up there.
Yeah.